the personal token panel, also called my publicly traded life, last notice. I'll get started here. So frankly, I think we're really witnessing the birth of a new category in Web3. Some are calling it social finance or SoFi, which we love. Other folks are just calling it an extension of DeFi or open finance. We all really think it's the future and really a pathway for hundreds of millions of users to get onboarded onto Web3 and take crypto mainstream in a completely unique way. Today, we're going to speak with some of the first people to kind of take this movement and initiative forward, as well as one of the godfathers of the space, if I could say that. I'll go ahead and just introduce everyone quickly. We'll get into a few lightning talks, and hopefully we'll have time for questions. So my name is Bradley Miles. I'm the co-founder of a company called Roll. We provide infrastructure for personal tokens, or what we call social money. We think the future of personal tokens will be social and based around the community. A lot of these individuals have formed their own digital community, and you'll hear from them a bit about Roll. So there's over 150 communities on Roll. There's over 4,000 users, growing pretty quickly, and really just super excited to take part in the ecosystem. With us today, we also have Mike Merrill. Mike is the first ever publicly traded person. In 2008, he issued formal shares of himself via Kamakhya. You can learn more about the project at kamakhya.com. Kamakhya, kind of began as a way for Mike to crowdsource decisions about his creative work. Really, that emerged as a tool for him to ERC 721s. He's one of the first people to conduct a raise via personal token. He'll talk about that, his backers, and what's next for the Alex community. His move to his move to San Francisco from Paris. Kerman Kohli is with us as well. Kerman's the founder and editor of DeFi Weekly, which really provides deep analytical insights into material events across Web3, like the Fulcrum hack and others. He uniquely breaks down these insights with simple explainer videos and graphics as well. You can check that out at DeFi Weekly. Kerman very recently launched Carmen, a personal token for his digital community, and he's currently doing a raise similar to Alex from a passionate group of backers and supporters. He's also currently an engineer at Immutable, the creators of God's Unchained. Let's get right into it. So Mike, let's start off with you.
Sure.
Super excited to have you here. Is this your Web3 crypto debut?
Yeah, I think so. So I've been fascinated with it for such a long time, and it's really, I sent a tweet out. I was like, it's so exciting. For the longest time, I was the world's only publicly traded person. And years ago, I stopped saying that. I started saying the world's first publicly traded person, just like fingers crossed, hoping that there would be more. I had to find my people. So it's nice to be here with sort of the next generation of publicly traded.
Amazing. Okay, so take us back to 2008. What was the inspiration for Kamakhya?
I was in Portland, Oregon, and it's a very lefty city up there, and kind of grew up in and around a lot of early internet and sort of anti-capitalist culture, as far as activism and those kind of things, which never really, I was a little bit more I guess I was a little bit more playful with it. And so I was looking at things like, I don't know, almost more like Adbusters and some of the early kind of Yes Men and these people that could kind of play with these ideas a little bit more. And I had a project, I was doing a lot of online media projects, and I had one where I was trying to pull a bunch of money together to win this charity auction that I wanted to kind of mess with. And I lost by a little bit, and I was on the phone calling people being like, can I get a little bit more from you or you? And I missed it. And I was disappointed. And then I sat there and I was like, man, why not just have a pool of money from all these people that kind of trust me, that know I'm going to spend it on some weird, interesting, creative project, as opposed to having to go and fundraise for each individual project as I do it. And that was kind of the genesis of the idea, is pooling of, these resources, these funds together. And then thinking through that was well, people are going to want to get out, what if you want your money back? And I was I kind of came up with this idea of you could vote on things, and I was basically capitalism already created a model for this, and so how can I replicate something kind of in miniature that works on this big grand scale and take it down to the individual? So when I started, it was very much project based. It was what kind of what thing are we going to work on? And as I continued, I really, I like to say it was the invisible hand of the market that sort of turned that from controlling my projects to controlling my personal life. That was really where the interest was, and I sort of followed along. So pretty soon I was putting up votes like, should I move in with my then girlfriend? Should I get a vasectomy? Where should I live and work, and all these kind of decisions. And the more what I found is, it didn't matter if it was a big decision or a small one. It was the more I cared about it, the bigger the reaction from my community was. And so it really was this thing where I was like, it was forcing me to really think through these decisions in a really honest way, and hold myself accountable to this feedback. Sometimes I was not, it wasn't exactly what I wanted to do, but it was enough of a challenge that I was like, I'll give it my best shot.
Right. I want to ask you one more question, and then potentially we'll move on to Alex, or ask another question if we have time. But it seems like there's a spectrum of kind of like really, and I'm a Kamakhya shareholder as well, so I kind of see the questions coming out. But it seems like there's a spectrum from like, material life decisions to like, should I go for a bike ride today? And like, how do you decide what decisions you want the Kamakhya community to make for you, and what's kind of, one of the most significant decisions they've made?
My rule of thumb has always been, anything I would normally ask my friends advice about is a shareholder question. So if I find myself out for a drink at a bar with a friend and I'm talking about something, I'm like, oh, that's a shareholder question, even if it's a small thing. And if it's, obviously if it's a large decision, those are better for the community. And there is a little bit of entertainment value as well, as like, I want to keep questions up because it's why people are participating. And so sometimes there'll be a little bit smaller questions. As I've gotten older, I have less big decisions to make in my life. It feels like I'm not at that kind of fulcrum point that I was 10 years ago. And so it's a little bit harder to find those really, really big moments. And I think you can kind of see that a little bit in the questions over time.
Yeah. And lastly, we just kind of heard that Sony bought your life rights to make a show inspired about Kamakhya on Amazon. Is that true?
Yeah. So it's super exciting. It's going to be a fictional version of this idea, and so I'm excited about it because it's all the things that you would do in fiction, that I didn't get to do. My life is not and will not be as dramatic as whatever ends up being portrayed. So yeah, fingers crossed on that. I'm looking forward to it. I'm, sort of like involved, but very much on the edge of being involved. So no like new news or updates about it, but it's definitely really exciting.
Yeah, welcome to Hollywood. Cool. Awesome. Well, awesome. Well, hopefully we'll get back with a quick Q&A. Let's go ahead and move on to Alex Masmej. So we got some background on Alex. We're now going to hear from him. Alex, what inspired you to launch your personal token, Alex?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. Super stoked to be here. So what inspired me to create the Alex token, especially my recent token sale, is the intersection between two things that I really love. And the first one is income sharing agreement, and this whole space of really ambitious founders wanting to, benefits from Silicon Valley perks without maybe being there. And so this whole outsider space I was really excited about. And the second thing, of course, is crypto, Ethereum, the application layer that I've been very deeply immersed into the past year. And what inspired me is that the two moments we merged together when a month or two ago, I decided that I wanted to move to San Francisco. I want to be a real founder. And this could be the ideal time to launch something that could be called like a personal round, which is before a seed round or other rounds. And it's a more personal way of having like backers and my community back me. And so this is what inspired me, I guess. Just a great narrative fit for two worlds that I knew and that I knew that eventually would coincide together.
Yeah, absolutely. And tell us a little bit about, the raise, like how many backers were involved? What was the average contribution?
Sure. So there was in total 30 participants, so 30. And the average, I think, was $700. But the average is bumped up by a few that did the max contribution that I offered, which is $2,000, $2,500. And so really there was a lot of people with $250, the minimum contribution, that really wanted to be early in myself and getting insights on my next 3 years and my future. And so it's playful money for them, but on aggregate for these 30 people, that's a great way for me to ease my move into San Francisco.
Awesome, yeah. And you've really kind of emerged as this this leader in this kind of new category of social tokens or social finance. What's your philosophy on this space, and kind of where are we headed?
I'm really excited about this niche of young, ambitious entrepreneurs. I actually created a fellowship myself 2 years ago, where there was 30 young people just exploring together and meeting, entrepreneurs in the past. In the social token category, before even Roller Crypto was created, there was James Gallagher that I've been in touch with, and I'm sure Mike knows as well. And so he won Pioneer, which is like a leaderboard where young people can try out things, and if they win, they can go to Silicon Valley. And I thought that bringing this with crypto and the entire value proposition that you can get backers from all around the world with zero friction, for me was really attractive. And so I think this is where I'm headed for that niche. This is where we're headed. But also not just this, but also, athletes, like we've seen with Spencer Dinwiddie in the NBA, but also hip hop artists, so rising SoundCloud artists. And I guess, Instagram influencers, TikTok influencers, any of these where the person is at the center of the community, I think could be really interesting to see, and looking forward to the future of the space.
Awesome. Yeah. So let's dive into Alex the token a bit. So you're a few weeks after the raise. What's next for the Alex community? How do you see your community evolving?
So right now I'm making big decisions as to how to time my move and characteristics of my move. So which visa should I take? So for instance, I'm applying for a green card right now in 2 different ways. We've been talking about this, discussing. I was introduced to some lawyers because of people in my participants. So really the backing of the community is awesome. And I think, as a whole in crypto, community is everything, because it's easier than ever to move value. But now it's about beyond value. What can you provide? What can you contribute? And I'm very proud to have people like maybe Dan Finlay, which is actually here in the audience, from MetaMask supporting me, because it's a huge signal that it's almost like a credential, to be honest, that I've created by saying these people, have faith in this new category. So technicalities about my move, then introductions into Silicon Valley, I guess that I'm gaining are the 2 main ones right now. And I am privately discussing my income and as transparently as possible disclosing my life to those backers. And this is basically how I communicate with them. But I won't say this publicly for the exact details of everything. And this is, I think, like the secret of it is like we actually feel like a small community together. And I really like this aspect.
Awesome. And lastly, how can people stay up to date on the Alex community?
Sure. So my main content, I guess, creation is on Twitter. So I post a lot about my updates. I've been transparently sharing my learnings for the past year on Twitter. But also I have basically, so the private thing I was telling you about is not too private. You can access it by actually paying Alex. These are free for Alex holders, but if you want, for 6,000 Alex, you can get access to my monthly update where I will go a bit more private about the technicalities of my sale, of where it's heading, and also how they can help and how we can support each other.
Awesome. And I want to jam on this for a few more minutes. So Alex, as everyone knows, is an ERC20 token. Talk about how people can buy Alex, what that process is like. And, Alex can also, kind of be searched on Etherscan as well. Do you know how many holders of Alex there are in total?
Yes, I think there's 170 holders in total on Etherscan. but maybe that's discounting some people holding it on Roll, the website itself, which is a web app. I don't think it does count there. So it's perhaps around 200 people. You can trade on Uniswap. There's some address like exchange.tradable.com or alex.buymagic.xyz where you can easily buy it. And so you can get an hour of my time. There's some utility to it, which is outside of my raise that I did, where I'm incentivizing with my future earnings. But for everyone else outside of the sale, Alex is still available for many things. So you can tweet from my Twitter account. You know, some projects in crypto needing visibility contacted me saying, hey, can you tweet this? And they bought like, you know, a few $dozen of Alex, so like a very tiny amount. But that's enough to, you know, create some demands for the token and just have new use. And I think, and we've seen this, we're seeing this with Kerman right now. We're discovering new use cases as we go along the way. And that's really exciting. And so, yeah, you can buy Alex on Uniswap and we can discuss about the many things, but you know, I can introduce you to the crypto space. I can share my learnings. I can share on Twitter. I can give you feedback on the product. You can do user testing with me. There are many things, and we can discuss in private if you want to use my token for something that isn't listed on the Roll website.
Awesome. Well, yeah, it's amazing to see the Alex community evolve. Let's jump over to Kerman Kohli here. So Kerman, you're also on your way to becoming one of the first ever publicly traded people. What inspired you to kind of make the decision to launch Kerman?
Yeah, sure. So I think as an entrepreneur, there are two very important aspects to every business: product and distribution. And I spent many years working on product, and I was reading Ryan Holiday's book, Perennial Seller, and he has this notion of having like 1,000 true fans, right? And you need 1,000 true fans who will engage with whatever creation you bring into this world. And like, I'm a creator, whether it's through my writing, through my ventures, through the code that I write, considering I'm an engineer. And then like recently, Andreessen Horowitz had this post about having super fans, and rather than having 1,000 true fans, you have 100 super fans. And the personal token seems like an even smaller subset where you almost have like an army level of fans who like back you ridiculously well. And to me, it was kind of rallying them around like this one purpose and cause. And allowing that to be like a distribution channel for whatever it is that I'm creating now, but also in the future. And that whole aspect around it, the fact that they're, not only is there like an altruistic or a trust or reputation element, because a lot of people know me personally, or they've been like following my work for the past few years, but there's now like this financial incentive alongside it as well, which makes it extremely, extremely interesting. So it's a completely new thing, and Alex kind of shed some light on like how that went. I was like, cool, like let's run with this and see how we can extend this. And that's kind of where the token utility around me is kind of try to iterate on that more, where it's saying like, okay, having some governance decisions around my life itself, redeeming tokens for a post on DeFi Weekly, consulting, a newsletter subscription. And also like, in addition to all of that is like kind of 5% all the revenue from DeFi Weekly kind of like goes to buying and burning tokens. So I think it's a MVP, but this is going to be iterated on, just as Alex said, and really exciting to see where that kind of goes.
Yeah, that's fascinating. We're hearing a lot of talk about this category sort of being its own primitive, and that allows a lot of tools to kind of be built on top of the primitive. So, you know, you're currently in the middle of a raise for Kerman. Can you talk about that a little bit? What's the process been like?
Yeah, so it was initially kind of getting all the prep work going and kind of like saying, what does utility look like? Who are you kind of targeting? How much raise? All those kinds of things. And then it was kind of like execution mode. And the first 2 days, like I think were the first 2 days were pretty kind of quiet, and the community sentiment seemed to be pretty positive, and it was like, cool, like kind of easy going. And then kind of on the third day, there was like this massive explosion on Twitter where there's like a bunch of people saying like, hey, this is like terrible, we shouldn't be doing this on Ethereum. And then he said another side, which is like, hey, this is amazing, we should be doing more of this. And I think that day itself was just like extremely polarizing, because you kind of go from thinking like, oh, did I make the wrong move online, to being like, holy shit, so many people love this. And I think it's been like a great learning experience. And I think the fact that the worst thing about anything is if nobody cares. And what's been amazing to see is that many people in the community have shown that they care, positive or negative. It means that we're onto something here. And I think that's like a signal in itself.
Yeah, I was reading one of your tweets, and you used the term hashtag SoFi recently. Can you elaborate on what you meant by that, or kind of what that term means?
I was discussing with Alex, and a lot of people use the heuristic of DeFi, which is decentralized finance. It has to be as trustless as possible. Everything is in code, and it's about money. And you kind of have like a sister category to it called SoFi, where it's not about like minimizing trust, but it's like, how do you bring the element of the social and financial and mix them together into this really unique blend? And I think
Is what?
it's to bring the ability to invest and share in the upside of all the potential that's out there in the world, regardless of geography, age, region, gender, sex, whatever. And I think like that's one thing which really resonates with kind of me and Alex is that we're two entrepreneurs. Like, we're not in Silicon Valley. We've kind of just like built up our following online, and we can essentially manage to do what we want to do all through the internet with no barriers, no permission required, and truly at a global scale.
Awesome. That's incredible. Yeah, I'd probably add community ownership in there as well.
I think we lost.
Yeah. I was like, I hope that isn't me lagging out.
I like what you said about the part about like, if you're doing something, you know, the worst is that nobody cares, because I remember I had kind of my peak moment of popularity around, I think it was like 2013. There was a Wired article, and I got to be on Good Morning, the Today Show, and like, I basically have never paid attention to morning TV, but it was such an onslaught of attention, and obviously that ratio, you know, when the negative comes at you, and I was like, man, I had some really, really angry people. But also, I think probably for all three of us, I've always thought like this project for me has always worked like kind of this lighthouse or this beacon that attracts like-minded people. And like in the same way that like the Sunday morning that I woke up after really doing like, do I want to spend $250 on Alex because he set the minimum so high, and I'm so frustrated with him for that. I woke up and I was like, fine, I'm going to do it. And I go to do it, and it was sold out. And I was like, oh man. But like in that same way, like I don't know him from anyone, but just over a couple of days of like going through and reading about it and getting involved, I really saw like, I was like, oh, this is someone like me in this way. Like why wouldn't I want to like, you know, follow along in that journey? So that was exciting.
Actually, you can also vote on my life with Alex tokens, and I saw your decisions, right? And I think one of the latest one was about painting your nails, and sounds like the color, you know, orange one. So that's kind of fun. Yeah, but I totally agree with Carmen about you know, bringing opportunities to every young people. Like, you know, there's like the Teal Fellowship, which was awarded by Vitalik, awarded to Vitalik Buterin, the creator of Ethereum, and I think that's amazing. But what about democratizing this sort of, you know, community and financial fellowship type help to everyone in the world? And so I think this is really what we're doing here. And also agree about the distinction between DeFi and SoFi, where in SoFi, there is some trust involved, and you have to, you know, believe the community and the credentials that the person built over time. And it's valuable. And we saw that it's been working very well for Kerman and I. And so super excited. And I think it was done very carefully. And I understand people being scared of these new experiments. And I think Kerman and I were also, you know, a bit scared of being so out there, very like to the world, but it worked out fine. We are, I think, doing very considered decisions. And I am super open to, you know, new improvements. This is more like an MVP in the fly. And I'm ready to, you know, improve and add any kind of layers, whether it's legal layers or like new mechanisms, basically improving on what we've empirically seen to be working. But the space is so new that I think it was the best way to do it. It's just to completely be naked and see what works. So now we've got interest. Okay, cool. Let's make it something so that it can scale to thousands of people. But the approach that I think Kerman and I have done is really cool. And yeah, like it's really fun to see you in person, Mike. And so do you see any other people actually discuss like, tokenizing themselves after you did or no?
I've had a handful of people that have sort of approached and been like, hey, can I, either use the same code base or do something like that. And my take has always been, I look at what I'm doing as not necessarily the right way. I think, like you were just saying, mine was very much an experiment of like, what would this look like if? And in my mind, I can kind of see the right way. And it's something more where, like all of these people can trade kind of in the same pool, as opposed to these individual siloed, like websites. So like, I've been hesitant to sort of say like, oh, here, I'll help you do the same thing I did. The other part is it's hard. Like it's a hard way to live. Like I've been doing this for, like coming up on 12 years now, like I've been doing like, and it started small, not, like a dozen plus of my friends. And there's so many, I think people get so excited about the money, and it's actually the part where, Alex, I think people are going to look at that and say like, oh, I want $20,000. But I don't think what they see is the amount of work put into it and the commitment in that long term. And so I think that's probably the danger area for people, is like this is a long haul game, and the risk that I think in some ways, you guys are like the new potential like high rising stocks, right? And I'm maybe a little bit more of the blue chip, right? When we talk about that reputation aspect, I've been doing it for a long time. You can see a very long history, and with you guys being younger, there's less reputation, right? There's less history there just because of how long you've been doing it. So it's a lot more on that future looking. And so, there's also like, there's going to be people, hopefully not either of you, but there's going to be people who try this and fail, and we have to be okay with that. We have to not punish people that fail. Like, I think people are still so mad at the ICO days because so much failure. And it's like, that was the experiment. Like those people risked that money and they knew what they were doing. And if people chased it in this kind of get rich quick way, then like, it's a little bit like buyer beware, like people have to do their homework. People have to do their research before they invest.
Yeah.
Especially in this realm of no regulation, right? Like it's a little bit scary.
And Dave, what was some of the backlash you got for your kind of like thing when you did it? Because that wasn't even kind of like say this whole ICO association. So what was like the key sticking point for people?
For me, because it's always been about decision making, that really hits people in this core sense, especially I think in the United States. There's this myth of the sort of like, the sovereign individual, right? And this like this rugged sort of like, I can do it on my own. And I think personally, I think that's an entirely flawed idea. I think we're all like, we're a human animal, right? Like we're human, we're a social creature. And so I think that idea that other people could control a life highlighted in people that maybe they didn't have as much control. And there's a really strong reaction. Like, how dare you let someone decide your life? And so I was accused of it being like slavery and like, oh, I'm unable to make decisions and that kind of thing. So a lot of like very troll-like hateful comments, none of which really mattered to me that much, because I think, like you said, it's that there's a strong reaction, right? So there's something there.
Indeed. Is there any time you've overridden the shareholders in the interest of kind of like, actually, no, like you guys are crazy, I want to do this?
I've definitely failed on a couple projects if you go back through. And so there's just been times when I've been like, oh, I was either unable or for various reasons to do it. The worst one was there was a vote to try to do polyphasic sleeping, which is like, instead of sleeping 8 hours a night, you try to sleep in these tiny little bits. And if you look on the internet, every young entrepreneur wants this to be real so bad, and the fact is it's just not true. No one, it's not a way to actually live your life in any way. So I tried it for like a month and a half, and it was killing me, and so I just had to throw in the towel on that one.
Oh man, that sounds brutal.
It wasn't good. So I was like waking up at like 3 a.m. and going for like miles long walks just to stay awake. It was strange.
Indeed. What was I think I was telling my girlfriend about it, and I was telling her about like, oh, like he even decided like whether he should marry his wife. So like, how was that thing when you decided to put that decision up for the shareholders? Like, what was going through your mind? Like, why weren't you just like, I'm gonna do this versus like actually let the shareholders.
Probably the biggest kind of narrative arc through Kamakhya was that whole process of I found myself single, and I thought like, what bigger decision is there than who you date? And specifically that idea that like we all have friends that are dating someone they shouldn't, and you get a little bit worried for them. And so I wanted to give my shareholders kind of veto power. And so that was kind of the start of that. And obviously that proposal at the very end was sort of the end of that, and it didn't work out in the end. So it's a pretty amazing narrative arc, and I think that story and the way that it was captured on this one podcast that I was kind of talking to as he sort of documented the demise of that relationship was actually what sparked the interest for the TV show. So that's interesting. They optioned my life and this episode of the podcast, and so as painful and hard as it was, it's also like that's also where a lot of like hard, real emotional truth came out of that was recognized, and fingers crossed turns into something.
I actually think this is like a decent TV show idea where it's like a house of social token people, and they are guided every day by what the actions the audience asks them to personally. And I think this could be very funny to see, and perhaps we'll see this in the coming years. But this sounds really interesting.
I actually got to pitch a sort of reality TV version, which was a little bit like that, to CBS like years ago. I got to come down to LA and go in, and I'm super nervous and sweaty, and I was like, but it was really fun. That was kind of the idea. It was like, what if there was this sort of like group of people all having their decisions made externally, but forced to kind of interact together. I kind of agree. I think there's something kind of a little bit like puppet mastery about it, as well as like you're trying to like, increase your value. So there's a little competition aspect as well. We should pitch that when you get this state.
I have the worst internet connection in the world, guys. I apologize in advance. It's got out a few times. In general, so Mike, I just kind of wanted to ask you, and then I know we have some questions in the audience, specifically Igor and Dan. Have you, and sorry if you guys covered this, have you received any criticism over the past 12 years with Kamakhya, like any non-believers?
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit. I was saying that people really hate the idea of giving up choice, and I think as they're confronted with that in my project, they have a real visceral reaction, and they see that as a weakness on my part. And I think, my counter to that is always, I put more time and effort into these choices than anyone else does, right? Like when I have to write a full essay and try to convince people one way or the other, and I really put, I think just like so much energy in, and I kind of have a sense of how my shareholders are going to vote, like individually, some of the big shareholders. So as I'm writing things up, I'll kind of be thinking about certain ones and being like, oh, I know, got to put that in for Josh, or I got to put that in for so-and-so, and so it is a very like kind of political game, but it also helps me think through things from other outside external points of view. And so I would argue I'm making more of a decision by kind of relinquishing that control, because all of us have that influence, that external influence that's hitting us. And the flaw might be that I'm valuing these opinions based on how many shares they own, but these are people that have either direct shareholder influence or sort of this fuzzier sort of friend or relationship influence.
Totally. I'm going to unmute a few people, specifically Dan from MetaMask, who I know had a question. Dan, do you want to go ahead and ask?
Did I have a question? I mean, there's so many interesting questions that could be asked in here. Sorry, you caught me off guard. I was like taking notes and talking to people on the side at the same time. I'll come back to me in a minute.
Okay, cool. I think Igor, did you have a question?
No, not really.
Okay, cool. Sorry, just heard from Travis otherwise. Awesome. Well, we have 9 more minutes left. Alex, Kerman, Mike, did you guys want to share any ideas on future of the concept? Did you guys have questions for each other? You're all in sort of a unique category, and this is kind of, I think, the first time you're all meeting and talking to each other.
Hey, Bradley, actually, this is DeFi Dad. Can I ask you guys a question? I got a good one for you. Just wondering, so as you move forward, I'm thinking of the fact there's a lot of lessons learned from Mike, and I'm wondering for Kerman and Alex, how do you guys think about reporting on your accountability to all of this? Like, how do you think about tracking that? Like, I feel like that's kind of a part of the ethos of our community, and I think if you do a really good job with that's where it kind of takes some of the heat off of you with people, being trolls about it and just giving you any sort of hate.
Yeah.
I can start with that. Just like I will say that when I built Kamakhya, the idea was, hey, let's collectively come and do these projects. And even as it turned more about my personal life, the project itself became the biggest project. And so like the reporting and the shareholder emails and the maintaining of the community takes up a lot of time and energy, and it really diminishes kind of like what you can do over here. And so for Kerman and Alex, I would say, be aware that there's like, there's a large part of your night and weekend time outside of whatever sort of like job you're doing in the future that is going to be maintaining this community and building it. And it's not a small amount of work, and I think you guys probably know that already, and you've been in this space long enough that you understand that. But it's like, the more like, it's a slow thing that you have to feed constantly all the time in order to like really build it over a long period. And it's the part that when people come to me and want to be publicly traded, and I'm like, yeah, but what's like, are you still going to want it in, 10 days, a month, a year from now? Like, it's a little bit like the guru at the top of the mountain being like, sorry, we're closed, sorry, we're closed, sorry, we're closed. And if you still stay there, sort of Fight Club style, then like, okay, third day you can come in kind of thing. So I would say like that reporting aspect is a huge burden, and I think really important.
Yeah, indeed. And I think a lot of stuff around like the personal token community, it's like, in which light are you viewing to do this, right? Like if it's kind of like, I'm trying to use a bit of short-term cash to get a quick benefit, it's like a terrible like kind of calculation, because you're staking your reputation and like a lot of trust, quite simply like the people that really believe in you. So when you go into it, you're really like, the mindset and the reason should be like, I want to be able to like leverage this community to do like some amazing things over the long term. And this bit is just like the start of it. And I think like that's like the thing which really makes a difference, where if you're kind of like, if it's short-term cash, like there are much better ways of earning it than trying to raise off like people off the internet and staking reputation at the same time, right? It's like everything else, motivation really does matter.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree with what Kevin said. And I would add that it kind of acts as a personal board of advisors, the participants in my sale. And so the accountability and the feedback is actually something I'm seeking, which is amazing. I'm a founder, but I don't have investors yet. I am before that stage. And so having accountability and people to report actually gives me an incentive to have a clear picture of my life regardless. So that's a huge perk. And yeah, I totally agree. It's a long-term thing. So for me, it's 3 years long. And so I might discontinue or not after this time, but it's nice to have a boundary, in my opinion. But yeah, it's not a quick, money grab scheme, because it's a long period. I have always been transparent with the community. This is kind of why I built that community in the first place, is because I am so transparent with my learnings and with what I'm doing. And so the way I'm notifying my backers is by email monthly with my newsletter. And this will be kind of like a longly written email. And although it can take some time, I think it's valuable time. And I'm willing to spend that time to, build my community and discuss around personal decisions where I think their feedback would be valuable. but at the same time, I still think I can retain a lot of founders' business time at the same time. So it's a twist on Mike, but really interesting how it can really take up your life if you're really if the binding choice is a core value prop. So I guess it's a slight twist, at least for me, from Mike, but still super excited to have Mike here. And it's great to have new experiences. And I'm actually I'm actually eager to see someone like Mike Merrill who doing this on crypto and doing like the framework for, selling your life choices away.
Dang. I have sort of a blockchain DeFi question for Alex and Kerman. So if SoFi, as you guys call it, is a new category, how do you see it interacting with DeFi? Is there sort of a DeFi SoFi stack that should exist? What other things besides, I guess, exchange become important? Can you see how these two things can merge?
Yeah, I can quickly take this. So for Alex, the SoFi DeFi bridge is that the people who participated in my sale, they can basically use their tokens, which is a claim on my revenue, to use as a utility. And what's really cool here is that it's a one-way bridge to the utility side. So, using my time, voting on my life, etc., which means that my income sharing agreement duties actually go down over time as people use my token. And this would actually be very hard to implement without, a simple crypto secondary trading market, which is really cool. And yet, the income sharing agreement is still restricted to my community, making it a closed, feel, and, they participated in it. They only deserve this, but they can trade for the utility side. And I think all this composability with Uniswap and all these DeFi platforms is unique to crypto. And so for me, this is where the bridge is coming. Basically trading it and leveraging other open source platforms without asking for permission.
Yeah.
Kerman, anything on this stuff? Oh yeah, good.
Yeah, like for DeFi, the number one thing that we always kind of talk about is liquidity. And you have like this ramp of like graduations of liquidity where you start off on an AMM, then you graduate to a decentralized exchange with an order book, and then you get traded on a centralized exchange. And SoFi is like right at the beginning, right? But if you can have a personal token which graduates through the ranks, that actually then starts becoming DeFi collateral in itself. And then you have like everything in the financial world now applicable to a person in itself. And I think we're starting to see like this new like emergence of like internet native, I would say superstars of sorts. And whether it's like streamers, I'm biased, but I'd like to think engineers one day, and all these things which are like high value on the internet, but kind of being tokenized and then being like very solid collateral basis based on reputations. And that's like, I think the more interesting experiment around tokens. It's like, yeah, you can mint an ERC20, but how do you think about like getting distribution, building liquidity, and treating it like a regular token? Because the more liquidity it gets, the more interoperability and network effects it has in existing applications. So yeah, like I think lending markets for your personal token, that's like really crazy. You know what, like, oh, I want to borrow a bunch of tokens because I want to have more influence on this life decision. Let me go ahead and do that. It's for the financial thing. So that's something that I'm kind of like really, really keen to see down the line.
Incredible. Yeah, it sounds like we could talk for hours about the potential for that SoFi DeFi bridge, but we are out of time. I want to thank Mike Merrill, Kerman, Kohli, and Alex Masmej for joining us. This has been great, guys. Thanks so much. I guess if we have one more minute, how can people stay in touch with all you guys?
Thank you, Bradley. Go on. Well, my Twitter at Alex Masmej is my main point of contact, I would say. And I'm starting a new project and going to San Francisco, so you can keep in touch there.
Yeah, same. Also, Twitter's probably my most prolific output and entry point, as well as kmikegame.com. So I'm easy to find. I've been around for a little while.
Twitter at Kerman Kohli. The tweet game is strong.
Hey, thanks so much, thanks everyone for joining. Really appreciate it, and have a good day.
All right, bye.